Well, hello and welcome to those of you that just watched Altitude Adjustment with Mario Vitanzi and Patrick Coyote. I am Kodiak Broncos, and today I am going to be grading every single player in the Broncos 2025 draft class. Now, here's the deal. I uploaded this earlier and before I went to dinner for my birthday, which isn't even until 3 weeks from now. Actually, the same day free agency starts as the same day my birthday is, which is March 9th. So hopefully I have a good birthday. Hopefully the Broncos don't ruin it. But at the end of the day, I went out to dinner and I forgot Pat Bryant. So I'm just going to redo this, and I'm going to redo this live and in front of a studio audience. But before we get into it, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can always wait till the end. Hopefully, I'll earned it. And yeah. So if you're watching live on the replay, make sure you leave a thumbs up. Make sure you share. Make sure you are a part of the community that we're building of talking Denver Broncos football. And yeah, also, I am a little tipsy. I did have some limoncello at dinner tonight, so yeah, I can't wait for you guys to just hear everything that I have to say because ultimately, I think that it is going to be an absolute blast tonight while we talk about the 2025 draft class that the Broncos underwent back in April this past year. So here's the deal. All right, we're going to begin with our first draft pick. Now, I'm talking about Jahdae Barron. He was somebody that I was a little surprised we took. All right, all the way back in April, all the way back in draft season. Anybody that had Jahdae Barron to the Broncos, I was just like, this is an over extrapolation of resources. I was like, this doesn't make sense. This is not going to work out here. I was like, this is not going to be good. Jackson says, "What's up, Kodiak?" Jackson Oviat says, "What's up, Kodiak? What's up, Jackson? Pleasure to see you in here. Hope you are going to enjoy my stream. Always great to see my regulars pop in." Cobra289 also says, "Hi, Kodiak. Hello. Hello, and welcome, my friends. I hope you guys enjoyed Altitude Adjustment. But now I am live, and I'm going to do a live recording of review of the Denver Broncos 2025 draft class. But either way, what I was saying about Jahdae Barron is that everybody during draft season, nobody had Jahdae Barron mocked to the Broncos. I think if you had mocked corner to the Broncos during draft season last year, everybody would have thought that you were hitting the crack pipe. I think everybody would have thought that you were absolutely out of your mind. I think everybody, if you had mocked corner to the Broncos before the actual NFL draft in April 25th, I want to say the day was last year, then I think that people would have just assumed that you were a crazy person. That being said, if the most accurate mock draft, if somebody were to mock the actual results of the NFL mock draft, then everybody would be just spamming, in the comments or the replies of their particular post or whatever, that they were absolutely off their rocker. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I just want to say a couple things. So, first of all, Jahdae Barron, all right? Time to talk about him because I've done enough stalling. All right. Let this be a lesson to you all. Okay. Pure BPA only makes sense if your roster is Eagles level stacked or if your roster is Saints level horrible. Okay. I think Jahdae Barron, ultimately, he just was an over extrapolation of resources. I don't think it's particularly anybody's fault. I don't blame the Broncos for sticking to their guns with their evaluation. I don't blame the Broncos for wanting to, make a big splash in the draft. Even though I know that they were going to trade out of the pick if they didn't take Jahdae Barron. But at the end of the day, I think this ultimately just wasn't what the Broncos needed. I think that they should have traded back. I think that they should have taken Atlanta's trade down, or no, the Rams trade down with Atlanta, the package that, um, you know, Atlanta got, if anything, if they were considering sending that to the Broncos. I think that, if I were the Denver Broncos GM, I would have done that in a heartbeat. That being said, yo, what's good, Darian? Boost, Monty Ball. Yo, what's good, Darian? So, either way, Jahdae Barron, let's talk about him and his rookie year. So, obviously the pick happens. A lot of people are going back and forth, but then he delivers his press conference and everything's okay. That being said, I think Jahdae Barron looked solid while he was on the field. I think he was in dime a lot. He was the dime DB, and ultimately that's a role that he's going to need to improve upon going forward. I don't really want him to be our dime DB. Next year, I don't want him to be just a fourth cornerback off the bench going into next year, especially because you used a first round pick on him. But either way, I thought he looked overall solid when he was on the field. I thought he made a handful of plays. I thought he was a really smart player. I thought his instincts were great. So as far as, all the draft evaluations that said Jahdae Barron is a smart player. I think every single one of them was ultimately correct because Jahdae Barron is a smart player, all right? He could always see exactly where screens were coming. He could always, cover tight ends. He could always deal with the tough matchup, especially over the middle of the field. And he seldom played outside last year. But Vance Joseph, in his interview with Peter Schrager, said, our vision for him was inside year one, outside year two. And the Broncos coaching staff is one that thinks long term. And when they get a plan, they rarely deviate from it. So Jahdae Barrett, in my opinion, is probably going to be the team's outside corner this upcoming year. Now, Jahdae Barrett, all right. So, what were the shortcomings with Barrett in his rookie year? Sorry, I jumped the gun right there. The shortcomings with Barrett in his rookie year were that he was just a little too volatile with communication busts. All right. The idea with communication busts is I feel like, how many times did you see a running back just leak out of the backfield in the red zone completely unaccounted for, completely uncovered? Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne. It drove me absolutely crazy during those games against the Colts and Jaguars, respectively, when that happened. And ultimately, I just think that Jahdae Barron, he showed a lot of good flashes, but you think about the people you took him over, and the positions you took him over. All right. You took him over a running back, you took him over a defensive lineman. And I would love to have Derek Harmon now instead of Jahdae Barron. That being said, how much would Derek Harmon have played this past season? Either way, I'm still not a huge fan of the pick. I'm still not the biggest fan of using our first round pick on a guy like Jahdae Barron, just because I think it just wasn't what this team needed last year, and I stand by that. I stand by the fact that if you look at any of the stuff I put out last April, I said that this pick was not very good and definitely something that the team did not need. I think that the quarterback group did not require first round investment. That being said, I'm still hopeful for him. I'm still appreciative of Jahdae Barron, especially because he has dealt with this before. He was at Texas and he said, "Hey guys, I wanted to be three and done. I wanted to be three and gone to the NFL." But it didn't exactly work out that way. He said that it didn't work out that way, and it's going to be on God's timing, not his timing. So I do appreciate him. I do appreciate his outlook towards everything. And I'm still not a huge fan of the pick, but it doesn't change the fact that it made it. All right. Yeah, what's good, Road? And what is up, Aussie? I love seeing Aussie in here just because he brings so much unique insight that I feel like not a lot of people talk about. What's good, Aussie? Hopefully you're enjoying your fine afternoon as well. Yeah, what's good? Either way, Aussie is an absolutely phenomenal football mind. I hope you guys go follow him on Twitter at Aussie Talks NFL. He drops something in the Discord every day, and I'm like, wow. I didn't even think of that. He said, I'd like to see them move Moss into safety and see if he does play when better at playing the ball when he's off from it. That potentially is the case, but at the end of the day, you have two really strong safeties there with Hufanga and Jones. So it just remains to be seen. Now, maybe that's not to say that Moss can't be the long term solution at safety because ultimately I do think he does provide a lot of upside there. I do think he provides a lot of upside at the safety position above all else. That being said, I think, one of the main things that I'm concerned about with something like that is I think, safety is just a lot more than go out there and cover. And just because you can cover well, it doesn't mean you can be a prolific safety in the NFL. And, you see that all the time. There are some guys whose natural positions are quarter, some guys who are at safety, and you'd think you could translate well, but safety relies on much more better at run defense and much more communication skills as well. I like that Barron goes after the ball. He has a really high ceiling. He does have a really good ceiling, and I do think that he is one of those guys that could play across from Riley Moss or play across from PS2 and punish quarterbacks a lot more than Riley Moss can. Yeah. He was okay at covering tight ends, but that's still not his strongest role from Darian Bustamante. I think he was pretty solid at covering tight ends. Yes, while I still will agree that that's not his strongest role. Honestly, I feel like, unfortunately for him, his strongest role is playing the nickel because I feel like he's such a smart player. And ultimately, that's just something that this team does not need. Cobra 289 says, I just hope Barron can play more and show us something that shows why he's a first rounder. I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree because honestly, we didn't see a whole lot of that this past year. Now, stacked positional room, I get it. But, when Sertan went out there the first guy off the bench was Abram Strain, and Barron got more run in those situations and those games where PS2 was out. But either way, that really, really came to light there. Um, let me see. I will try to trade Jones even if for whatever I can get. I mean, trading Brandon Jones is definitely a possibility. I don't know. It's definitely not my favorite outcome just because of how good he's been at safety for us over the past 2 years. Um, yeah, exactly. Darian Bustamante, you put it best. I would knock the grade down because of the pick, not the player. Exactly. I got no issues with the pick itself, but or no, I have no issues with the player himself, but the pick, I just feel like this was not a smart use of resources. Right. I think, you just got to get a little bit more serious about your bad areas of your team next year, and you have to solve them. Okay. Now, I understand that you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into bad value and you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into something like a reach. I think everybody was just expecting the Broncos to take Omarion Hampton at number 20 last year. And that was completely fine. But once again, my pick there would have been Derek Harmon. And that wasn't something we necessarily needed. But I was thinking like, all right, I had the foresight of, all right, we have a lot of contracts upcoming on the defensive line. And yeah, that's pretty, I don't know either. Um, Either way, but yeah, Jade Barrett, I'm still not a huge fan of the pick, but I am excited for him. Yo, what's good? Xander S. 3810. What's good? What's good? Either way. So I talked about Jade Barron, and now it's time to talk about RJ Harvey. So I actually have Harvey graded lower than Barron, which I think is going to be a huge shock to a lot of people. And when the draft happened, is RJ Harvey a reach? Cobra 289 says, I don't necessarily think he's a reach, but I was just a little disappointed with what he showed based on the fact that he didn't capture this backfield. All right. So let me just tell you one thing. So I was initially very perplexed um, that Denver left free agency of the draft. This is the last thing I'll say about Barron, by the way. Martin Anzaluda. Uh, we know that Barron will get every opportunity to prove himself because they are not going to want to make it look like a mistake. You know what? Capital is very meaningful, but I feel like if there's one team that capital doesn't mean a whole lot on, it's the Denver Broncos because we have so many self-made guys and UDFA guys, if that makes sense. But I see what you're saying. Where is T Fishes? T Fishes is in Compton somewhere fishing. Either way, so talking about RJ Harvey, I was initially very perplexed that Denver left free agency in the draft, only adding Harvey before signing Dobbins. Okay. I think you were very, very lucky with the process of your running back room last year. And unfortunately, Dobbins did get hurt on a dirty play. And even though Dobbins is an injury prone player, there was still nothing that you could do to necessarily prevent that from happening. That being said, um, when J.K. Dobbins went down, I thought this entire offense was screwed. That being said, RJ Harvey, he showed a lot. Oh, there he is. There's T Fishes. Let's go. I was like, all right, he's probably in Compton fishing somewhere. But there T Fishes is. Either way. So I was initially very perplexed that Harvey was the only running back we had last year. I was pretty surprised that we forewent it in the draft. I was like, not even a Rico Daddle, not even I know you want me to say Nick Chubb, but I'm not going to do it. I was never in on bringing Nick Chubb last year, but I honestly was kind of in on bringing like a Najee Harris or something like that. Either way, I was initially very surprised that we only signed our RJ Harvey last year, or only drafted RJ Harvey last year, and he was our only running back that we added until June. That being said, with RJ Harvey specifically, I love the red zone ability. I love the playmaking. I love the receiving ability out of the backfield because that is something that we needed at running back for a long, long time. Okay. Think about the game against the Cowboys where RJ Harvey has 3 touchdowns. All right. One of them for 40 yards out, the other two in the red zone. Think about the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars where RJ Harvey just scampers to the end zone, 50-yard run that he made something out of literally nothing. Okay. I thought he was absolutely dead in the water, and RJ Harvey made a phenomenal play. All right. Buffalo game in overtime, man, sheds 2 defenders and is able to get to like the 45 of the opposing team or 50 or whatever. And that was something that we needed at running back for a very long time. And I just feel like he was very up and down as a runner. I feel like he was very boom or bust. And I feel like his vision was a fun house mirror. But Darian Bustamante says RJ was a small reach, but I also don't think Sean liked him that much. I would agree with the fact that he was a small reach just because he was like mocked as like a round 3, late round 4, early guy. But yeah. Oh yeah, you saw my tweet today. Harvey is the second most drops on the team. Yeah, that's not good, and that's pretty disappointing as well. Either way, so talk about RJ Harvey. I feel like he was very up and down as a runner. I feel like there were a lot of times where I was just like, all right, RJ Harvey is going to rip off an absolutely nuclear run. And he had a lot of games under 4 yards per carry. He had a lot of games under 50 rushing yards. And he had the chance to capture this backfield once Dobbins went down as a pure runner, and he just couldn't do it, which normally that's fine. But I feel like just because you didn't trade up for him, but you traded back with the intent of taking RJ Harvey. You got a little something in the later rounds to move up and get him. You know, I think RJ Harvey was a relative disappointment, all things considered, just because he is a 24-year-old running back. I would have thought that he came in here, just guns a blazing, and not to say that he is not, hey, he has tread on his tires, because he doesn't. That's not the thing I'm concerned about with RJ Harvey. The thing I'm concerned about with RJ Harvey is his ability to, you know, be a pure runner. And I just thought that we'd see a lot more of that, especially because, age adjusted stuff matters a lot more for these situations as well. That being said, he's not a bell cow, and that's completely fine. I feel like we kind of did take him to give him that shot to give him the bell cow role, but I expected more instant ground production from a 24-year-old. All right. He ripped off that run against Tennessee, and I was like, dang, yeah. Never loved RJ's vision coming out, and it showed. See, I thought he actually had pretty good vision at UCF. I thought he made chicken salad out of chicken scraps, if that makes sense. But yeah, his vision this year was just not very good. So I'm gonna have to see where I went wrong with my scouting and evaluation in that as well. But either way, I expected more ground production from a 24-year-old running back, and I just spoiled my Pat Bryant slide. But either way, we're not done talking about RJ Harvey yet. Either way, he's not a bell cow, but yeah, I just thought that there would be a lot more, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And I'm going to take a quick swig of water. Ah, okay. Okay. So, time to talk about Pat Bryant. Y'all know I love me. I love me some Pat Bryant because he was just one of the highest floor rookie wide receivers I've ever seen. Like, to be just quite honest, I think, his floor as a rookie wide receiver was just exceptional. I thought it was extraordinary. He really, really surpassed a lot of my expectations that I had for him. And that was absolutely fantastic. It was absolutely phenomenal. Um, Cobra 289 says, I think RJ is going to get better in his second year. I think so too. But, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I wouldn't bank on it just because I think the Broncos should not go into this offseason with the intent of, all right, we're excited with the progress that Harvey's going to make in year two. It wouldn't surprise me if he improved. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he improved, but I don't know. I still have admittedly my reservations. If the Broncos cannot sign Brees Hall, or if they cannot get Travis Etienne, I would like to see them get Algier from Atlanta and bring back J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, I think I'd be on board with that plan as well. Either way, so talking about Pat Bryant, once again, you guys know I love me. I love me some Pat Bryant. All right. And Pat Bryant, he appeared to be one of those guys that, the media seemed to be higher on than teams were. And Pat Bryant fit that mold. And he was one of the highest floor rookie wide receivers that I had ever seen. Anytime his name was called, he made the play. All right. Tough slant on 3rd and 8 against Houston. Man, he picked it up. Against the Raiders, 3rd and 10, we need you to take this screen pass for a first down. He made the play happen. A lot of the big runs that happened this year were the results of Pat Bryant blocking. And you know what? Pat Bryant, he was wearing that chain, and he was just like, I told these running backs, hey, man, I'll spring you free. And I love, love, love that mentality from your wide receiver. And Pat Bryant's only going to get better as a pure wide receiver, and he likes to operate out of the slot. So you got a power slot, all right? And the power slot is a relatively unique role in the NFL, and it's kind of cool that the Broncos finally have one. Um, yeah, Jackson is right. It sounds like the Jets are going to franchise tag Brees Hall. They are, for everything we've heard. Cobra says Bryant is great, but I worry about injuries and concussions. Maybe he should wear the kazoo helmet full time. Yeah, I think guardian cap full time is not that bad of an idea. And also, I think if they have to go with Atlanta's backup running back Tyler Algier, and if they have to go back with J.K. Dobbins, I would like to see them draft Mike Washington in the third. You know what? I like that plan. I like that plan, Biggie Bronco. Do you think Pat should put on some more muscle? Yes, but just hoping it doesn't sacrifice some speed because he's already not really that fast of a player. But yeah, I mean, it's never a bad idea to put on more muscle, but I just hope that his body can hold up in that situation as well. And yeah, either way, he blocks well, so not necessarily. This is also a good point. Like he already blocks pretty well. I don't know what he is. I think he's around 6'2", 200, 6'3", 200, like something like that. So he can currently block well with his frame. And honestly, that's honestly enough. But either way, like I said, Pat Bryant was a key contributor on those money downs. And he was a big reason why I think that he was expendable before this year began. All right. Martin says, I'm really high on Pat. His future is bright, in my opinion. You are completely right. I am also very high on Pat Bryant going into year, uh, what is it now? Two? Yeah. Year two of Pat Bryant. I think he's a really good player. I think he's going to be really, really, how do I put this? Um, I just think that he's a really, really high floor dude, and yeah, that's just a big thing that I really like about his game, is that anytime the play came to him, he made it, and that was, like, just great, and that was great. That was something that I really, really liked about him. So, yeah. So, yeah, either way, talking about Pat Bryant, I just think that he's a lot more high floor than a lot of people think. But yes, I agree with this sentiment as well. Bryant is very clutch. He makes the play when you need it. Um, yeah, either way, that's completely cool as well. All right. That is completely cool as well. All right. Now let's talk about our defensive end, Savion Jones, okay? Savion Jones, he played the least out of any rookie on this team, and the Broncos put him in an entirely new D-line position than he played at LSU, and he's still getting adapted, man. He's still, finding his way onto this team. He's still finding his current role and his mold in the NFL, and that's completely fine, man. I think, if there is we all kind of knew that it was going to be a redshirt year for Savion Jones, especially with the emergence of Awazarike. Had Awazarike not emerged as good as he did, I would have thought that Savion Jones was potentially going to carve out a real role in this offense or defense. What am I saying? A lot sooner than he actually did, and ultimately, there's no big deal. Like once again, there's nothing completely wrong with that, but either way, so yeah, just talk about everything and thinking about everything that currently went on this past year. So with Savion Jones, he only played 33 snaps. I like some of the traits they flashed, but he has a long, long way to go physically. I think he gets pushed back a little too much. I think, he gets knocked back every now and then. And once again, like I said, a long ways to go physically, and it's completely fine. I think that, you know, the traits that he flashed were pretty good. Um, but yeah, he just needs to get stronger. He just needs more functional strength. He just needs to get better at playing his real position. And that's ultimately the big thing that I took away when I watched every single pass rushing snap that he had was I think he is a smart player. I like his motor, and I like the fact you can definitely tell that he played edge at LSU because he has a lot of those really nice pass rushing traits. But yeah, but this other thing that I think gets lost in the sauce about Savion Jones is that you can't just plug and play him. All right, you can't just hand him John Franklin Myers' starting spot. You need to add another pass rushing defensive end. And my grade for him is an incomplete. I'm not going to hold a strong positional unit against him because, to be quite honest, I think the Broncos had a very, very strong, what's it called, defensive line unit. And yeah, that's the ultimate thing that you need to talk about or think about right there as well. But yeah, so any thoughts about Sivian Jones? I know we still have people talking about Pat Bryant, but, you know, I'm going to take a sip of water. Woof. Okay. Yeah, once again, I'm not going to hold a strong positional unit against him. I think he's completely fine for what he is going into year two. I think he's completely fine heading into this next season, and I think he did show that he belongs. definitely on your defensive line with the limited samples that he did get. He was only active in a couple games. He was only active against the Bengals. He was only active against the uh, who else was he active against? I think he was active against the Bengals, the Raiders, and the Chargers at the end of the year. Those 3 games as well. Oh, I hated the Savion Jones pick. I wanted Woodson considering Hufanga had an injury history and everyone was over PJ Locke. I thought Woodson would have been perfect in BJ's system. I mean, hey, Craig Woodson balled out this past year for the New England Patriots. So maybe you are completely right. T fishes. Either way, so maybe he would have. I like Jones to improve, get stronger, put on some more weight, and play more in year 2. You are correct. You are correct. Cobra 289. And yeah, overall, just if you're gonna yeah, overall, I think Savion Jones is going to be really, really nice. Once again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about him because ultimately he did have a limited sample. But yeah, now we're going to talk about Q Robinson. And yeah, so that's ultimately the big thing that you need to take away from that as well. So yeah. All right. Wait. My sister was about to bring my cat in. Sorry. Sorry if you saw me looking at my phone there. Okay, I just spoiled my Jeremy Crawshaw slide as well. Dang. What am I even doing out here? All right. So Q Robinson, he's another guy that was drafted to a strong unit, but even then, he only made plays. All right. He was a special teamer mostly, but he stepped in on the defensive side of the ball. There were a couple that really stood out to me: Houston, Kansas City, Jacksonville in the AFC Championship. That's when Q Robinson was really able to step in, and he was able to. How do you put this? He was able to just really step in and make a lot of plays rushing off the edge. Those sacks that he had on Patrick Mahomes and Drake May, those were crazy plays. And I did make a little highlight reel of Q Robinson on my Twitter. Go check me out on Twitter at Kodiak Broncos. Not too long ago. And Q Robinson had some insane athleticism, insane athletic upside. But either way, so Q Robinson was also just mostly a special teamer last year, but he stepped in on defense during a few games, during Houston, during Kansas City, and the AFC Championship game, as I had already mentioned. But all he did was make plays, man. I think that in a limited sample, he just flashed really, really good potential. I think he has really, really good stuff that he has going forward, or really, really good athleticism and a lot of really good traits going forward. And that's something that I really, really like to see out of my edge rusher out of my edge 5. Q Robinson is the best edge 5 in the NFL. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But either way, so I just love his upsides going forward. I think about his sacks on Drake May and Patrick Mahomes all the time, as I already mentioned. And I give him a B plus, man. I give him a B plus. I think the only way this would have gotten up to an A is if he had a Jonah Ellis level rookie year where he had 5.5 sacks, and he's clearly just buried behind 2 really strong starters. But even Q Robinson, he was buried behind 2 not only really strong starters, but really strong rotational pieces as well in Jonah Ellis and Dondre Tillman. And whenever we needed Q Robinson to step up and make plays, man, did he ever. Man, did he ever. He was really, really good in that role. All right, Jeremy Crawshaw. So, listen, I didn't want Jeremy Crawshaw because I just thought it was a really stupid idea, and I thought there was legit talent we skipped over for him. A few guys I wanted Kyle Monangai. I wanted Damian Martinez. There were a few other guys that I wanted over Jeremy Crawshaw, but yeah, ultimately, that's the big thing that you need to think about is that I wasn't a huge fan of this pick. All right. I was willing to give Crawshaw a chance, but I really didn't like this pick. But I was starting to slightly panic after the preseason. I was like, man, if this guy can't punt during the preseason, how is he going to punt during his games in the NFL? But then my worries then were put to the rest. Week 1, he just boomed one against Tennessee, and I was just like, all right, I guess we're good right there. But yeah, he had not a perfect rookie season, but I think something that was undermined was when he needed a punt big. And trust me, he was on the field a lot. Like I think I want to see less of him next year. Um, he really stepped up, and he punted very well in our biggest games of the year. I think about New England, I think about Buffalo, I think about that, and Jeremy Crawshaw just did a really, really good job punting for this team, especially in crunch time, especially in our biggest moments. And yeah, I'd give him an A for this past season. Caleb Warner, I'm giving this a resounding F. I just never thought this made sense at all. Like, listen, seventh round picks still matter. Everybody's just like, well, it's a seventh round pick. It's not that big of a deal. I agree, it's not that big of a deal, but it still matters. All right. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because think about all the great players that have been taken in the seventh round that weren't just pure basketball players. Now, Caleb Warner is 6'8". He is 253, so he does offer something that is a little exciting. Oh, wait. Why did my slide not? What's it called? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I'm back to my what's it called? I'm back to my thing right there. All right, cool. Either way, Caleb Loader, 4 snaps in the preseason, 3 of them were penalties. He had 4 catches his final year at Utah. Sorry, I keep going ham with my slide right there. And then he had 4 catches his final year, and all 4 of them were for touchdowns. And honestly, I'd rather see him next year than Kroll. I think Kroll's a complete nothing burger. I think Troutman's a complete nothing burger. I think Adkins is just trash. There's just nothing redeemable about pretty much anybody on our tight end room besides Evan Ingram. No matter how much Sean Payton wants to tell you, well, Adam Trautman knows the system and he does everything well in the building. But yeah, and then exactly, Darian Bustamante, you had seventh Vele as the seventh rounder last year out of Utah, out of the exact same school as a skill position guy who was your second best wide receiver at certain points of the 2024 season. And then you did this. You took a basketball player, all right. And once again, I don't blame him because Caleb Loader was just doing what he was supposed to do. He was just a guy who was just out there just trying to pursue his dreams. So I can't hate him. I can't hate the fact that Denver used to pick on him, but I or I can't hate the fact that Denver used to pick on him, but I can't hate the pick. I can hate the people that made the pick for us, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. Sorry, I had to take a big swig of water there. But yeah. So Caleb Loader, I once again I'm just not really that big of a fan. I just think that it was just a really bad idea. There's almost nothing redeemable about that quality. Um, Jeremy Crawshaw, was the 10 out of 10 pick. I wish we had drafted Manungai in the sixth and JC in the seventh. Yes, I agree. Um, yeah, I agree. You know what? But that being said, I'm not gonna play like we could have had this guy, we could have had this guy, because ultimately you could just go down a huge rabbit hole. But I get what you're saying. Like Manungai would have been sick. It's too early to grade Loader. I don't disagree, or no, I don't agree with this just because we already have a year of all these guys, and we already have a year of Bryant, Barron, uh, Q Robinson, Crawshaw in our building, and I don't think it's just too early to grade any of them because I think their value to this team has been quantifiable. Yes, worst things you could do that light a seventh round pick on fire. Yes, I agree. I agree. Like you could trade for Deshaun Watson with that seventh round pick. They were hoping Loner was going to be the next Antonio Gates. Yeah, but for every Antonio Gates, like there's 8,000, you know, tight end converts or basketball tight end converts that bust. So I just never got it. I just never got the idea behind it. Or I think if you're going to do that, at least hope to resign him in free agency because these guys aren't that valuable picks. I'm sorry. I think we also took him with a late seventh round pick. So yeah, funny when people thought he would play in the playoffs from Darian Bustamante. That would have been hysterical if they activated him for the playoffs because I think didn't they designate Kroll and Sanders to both return during the playoffs? If we had Kroll and Loader return during the playoffs, that just would have been S tier comedy. That would have been S tier comedy. But yeah, overall, those are all my thoughts about the Broncos rookie class. Once again, I had to repost this video because I miss Pat Bryant. But yeah, I decided to do it live because why not? Why not? Would rather have Gadsden than Loader, bro. Me too. No dur. No dur. They called Loader up but kept him inactive. That's yeah, that's stupid. Or I think they said before the game that the purpose of that was just that they got a higher game day check. I made a video last year in May after the draft saying that the Broncos didn't take their needs seriously enough. Everybody just dismissed it. Everybody was like, well, like blah, blah, blah. The draft didn't shake out our way. I'm like, dude, come on. You didn't need to take a basketball player with your seventh round pick. And, we had a huge need for tight end going into the draft because, sorry, Kroll, complete nothing burger. And none of these guys had upside. Like the only guy in your room that had legitimate upside last year was Evan Ingram. He didn't even work out either that much. Now, whether it's his fault or the coaching staff's fault, not here to debate that. But, we did, unfortunately, really, really, really just, as far as all their needs last year, I feel like, the checklist, they were going through it, and the only one thing that they really did not get was tight end. Tight end. A lot of tight ends take years to develop. That is very true. And you know what? You're completely right. But the thing is, I think Loader's just a little too raw for my liking. I think just because of the fact that he made the switch over to football in his final year of college and the fact that he got like 3 penalties on 4 snaps, uh, I think that just showcased that he was a little too raw, and he's not going to last long in the league if that continues. But once again, I just the profile was a little wacky to me. TJ Hawkinson, that is just something I cannot get behind. TJ Hawkinson has the worst tight end contract in the sport. And I think giving an active asset with your 4th round pick to get that contract would just be unfathomable. His class is pretty deep. This class is pretty deep in rounds 2 through 5. Hopefully they draft 2. Yeah, I agree. I like Jolie. I like Claire. I like all these guys. I like Daquan Wright. I like Raridan. I like Cuevas. I like Endries. I like all these guys, man. So hopefully they turn it up. Hopefully they take their needs a little bit more seriously than they did last year. My head kind of hurts. I'm going to take some ibuprofen. TW says we're going to do it again this year. Man, I guess so. I guess so. Either way, it looks like I'm all caught up with comments, so I'm going to make this a rather quick live stream. Either way, appreciate y'all hanging out with me. Once again, I had to redo this. Start developing you a tight end for the future. Yes, I agree. I think that guy should be Eli Raridan no matter what. Either way, appreciate y'all. Sorry this was a quicker live stream, but I wanted to get this out there. But either way, I will see you guys next time. Go Broncos.